So this is the Pixel 5, and for the first time, I found myself feeling incredibly torn about a Pixel device. I used the last two flagships from Google, so the 3XL and the 4XL, as my main devices for as long as I could. And even amidst all the other devices that I reviewed throughout the life of both of those phones, I always came back to using the Pixels. But with the Pixel 5, I'm actually finding myself feeling less and less like I want to keep using this as my main device. Before we get to why this is the case, let's first start with what's good about the phone. So firstly, the front of this phone looks excellent, and that is mainly down to the fact that somehow, for the first time on an Android device, we have consistent thin bezels all the way around. And it really does make the front of this phone look fantastic, probably my favorite of any phone that's been released so far this year. Now, in order to achieve that full screen display though, Google has opted to ditch the Soli radar and all of those facial recognition sensors that debuted with last year's Pixel 4 lineup. And they've gone back to the good old capacitive fingerprint scanner on the back of the phone. So I love the return of the rear-mounted fingerprint scanner. It works far better than any in-display scanner I've ever used. But I will admit, I do really miss having any form of facial recognition. Even just a less secure version using the front-facing camera would have sufficed, but alas, now I always have to physically pick up the phone to unlock it. All right, quick pause in the video to thank today's video sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. So if you've played Raid Shadow Legends before, then you know that it is a truly world-class game in regards to quality and gameplay. There are 500 champions to collect, each with their own set of skills, and there are millions of artifacts to find and equip your champions with as well, which means that every single champion you build is pretty much unique. What I personally like about the game is the PvP aspect. I'm a big fan of the fact that you can challenge another player head to head, you versus them in the PvP arenas to see who's best. It's a lot of fun. They've also been updating the app heaps, and just recently they released the Artifact Forge, which is where you can save time and craft artifacts directly, and there's also a whole new advanced quest system with amazing rewards as well. They also introduced some amazing new champions, and the developers are also working on this amazing looking Doom Tower as we speak, which looks super exciting. It's been a crazy month of updates, so there's never been a better time to start playing. So what are you waiting for? Go to my link down in the description, and if you are a new player, you'll get 100,000 silver plus one free champion, and all of this treasure will be waiting for you right here. Good luck, and I will see you in the game. Now back to the front of the phone, and in terms of this display, it's pretty great. Really well color balanced, not grossly oversaturated like a lot of other phones on the market, and it gets pretty well bright enough for outdoor use. A little bit brighter than last year's Pixel flagships to my eyes, but still not quite as bright as other flagships on the market. Oh, and pro tip, if you have adaptive brightness enabled, then the display will get even brighter when it's in direct sunlight compared to if you have it set to max brightness with adaptive brightness switched off. The things you know. But the 90Hz refresh rate also sticks around from the Pixel 4 lineup, but it would have been really nice if Google had have bumped this up to 120Hz just to split the difference between it and the Pixel 4a 5G even further. And then battery life. We have a much larger 4080 mAh cell inside the Pixel 5, and you can tell an easy 5 to 6 hours of screen on time every single day, which is pretty great for my usage. And I've always found that battery life only gets better as you use Pixel devices thanks to its adaptive battery feature. So it's only going to get better from here. Now from there, pretty much everything else on this phone is a downgrade or a step backwards from last year's Pixel 4 flagships. You know what? Plastic or no plastic, the back of this phone feels very similar to the matte back of the Pixel 4 flagship lineup, which I love. So somewhat unbeknownst to me at the time, that was kind of a lie. For a bit of context, the phone that I was using in the lead up to reviewing the Pixel 4a was the OnePlus Nord, which has a glossy back, and in comparison to that phone, yes, the Pixel 4a's matte plastic back feels far superior in my opinion. But what phone did I switch back to after using the 4a? Yep, the Pixel 4 XL. And then I quickly realized that I'd kind of made a false statement. The matte glass on the back of the 4 XL feels so much more premium than the matte plastic back on the 4a and now the Pixel 5. Now at the Pixel 4a's price point, that's actually totally fine for me. It's a really good compromise that allows the price of that phone to come down to a point where it's incredible value for me. Same goes for the Pixel 4a 5G. But on the Pixel 5, a phone that is a decent amount more than both of those two phones, not so much. Now don't let the specs fool you. So whilst yes, a good portion of the Pixel 5 is made out of recycled aluminium, keep in mind that there's actually a big cutout in the middle here that allows for the wireless charging coil to be exposed. So no aluminium there. And secondly, all of that aluminium is coated in what Google calls a special bioresin. This means that you don't get that premium cool to the touch metal feeling when holding this phone. And in fact, it feels virtually identical to the back of the Pixel 4a. So then my next biggest disappointment, and you might laugh at me, but it's the haptics. And they did include their incredible haptic motor, which in combination with their software implementation is unparalleled in the Android world. Now, I also kind of got that one wrong. Again, I was kind of comparing the haptics on the 4a to the haptics on the OnePlus Nord. And in comparison to that phone, yes, they do feel much better. But then when I went back to using the 4XL, I realized that they're actually nowhere near as good as the haptics in the 4XL. And the Pixel 5 has the same haptics as the 4a, not the 4XL. It's really hard to describe, but when you use a phone with haptics as good as the Pixel 4 XL or the iPhones, for example, it feels less like a vibration and more like a little tap on your hand. But the haptics on the Pixel 5 do have that more vibraty feel to them, for lack of a better term. And then we have the software, and I tweeted about this a little while ago, but I really prefer Android 10 over Android 11, which is what ships by default with the Pixel 5. Long story short, ever since introducing gestural navigation, it's become much harder to use a third-party launcher without there being a big impact on the fluidity of using the phone. And it's become even harder again with Android 11. As a big fan of tweaking the look of my home screen setup to suit my style, this hurts deep. Now, as you can see, I have managed to customize the look of my Pixel launcher's home screen, but this does require root and the use of widgets, so it's not an easy task by any means. In terms of performance, look, I'll be honest, I do notice a difference between the Pixel 5 and the 4 XL, but I'm hoping this is more to do with software bugs rather than the efficiency of the chipset. For most use cases, you probably won't notice the difference, but there have been a couple of instances where the phone has just stopped for a beat and has had to catch up to me. Again, this is probably software related because the 765G chipset performed beautifully in the OnePlus Nord that I reviewed not too long ago. And then there's the speakers. You'll notice that there's no speaker grill up the top here like all past Pixel devices, including the 4a and the 4a 5G. And that's because the speaker is underneath the display. And whilst call quality is perhaps even more superior compared to past Pixel devices, speaker performance is definitely not quite as good. And so finally, it's the cameras. And the issue this year isn't that the cameras on the Pixel 5 are bad. Of course they're not bad, but the issue is that they're pretty much the same cameras that we've seen on all Pixel devices since the Pixel 2 launched in 2017. The only changes or improvements that have been made, they're all software based, and these all end up trickling down to older Pixel devices through software updates later on anyway. Now this year, Google ditched the telephoto lens that came with the Pixel 4 lineup and instead went with an ultra-wide. And whilst I applaud the inclusion of the ultra-wide lens, I just don't see why we couldn't have kept the telephoto lens as well. Having kids who like to run off into the distance, I actually found myself using that telephoto lens quite a bit over the past year, and so I definitely do notice not having it here with the Pixel 5. And even more than that, the ultra-wide lens on the Pixel 5 offers a considerably narrower field of view compared to most other phones on the market. Now, Google has introduced a new set of stabilization modes with the Pixel 5, and they've been fun to play around with. So you get active stabilization, locked, and cinematic pan. Cinematic pan is fairly similar to what you get if you took the 4K 60 shots and slowed them down to 50% in post, but it does all of the legwork for you. Keep in mind, the audio does get muted when you're using this mode though, no way to bring it back. Active stabilization is just a slightly more aggressive version of the stock electronic stabilization provided by default, but perhaps the most mind-blowing stabilization mode is locked. All right, so here we are about to hit record using locked mode. And if we punch into 5 times, you can see the frame is moving around as per normal. Then you hit record and it literally locks things off. So I'm obviously moving the exact same amount. And even if I try and tilt down, which I am right now, it'll take a good minute before it sort of catches up and then moves down very smoothly. So that's at 5 times. So that's a really cool feature, and the other stabilization modes are nice to have as well, as is the option to now shoot at 4K 60 using the main lens on the back. But guess what? All of those fancy new stabilization modes, they've been disabled on my phone for the past few weeks. No matter how hard I try, clearing the camera app's cache, clearing its storage, whatever I do, I cannot access that stabilization menu anymore. Yeah, so check this out. I'm at 1x mode at the moment. If I tap on the stabilization settings there, it comes up with an arrow, so it's indicating that it's registered my touch, but no menu pops up. No matter what mode I'm in, ultra wide, 4K 60, 4K 30, I cannot enter into that stabilization menu. I'm guessing this will be fixed in a future software update. So Google, if you're listening, please fix my phone. But overall for me, yeah, the cameras are underwhelming on the Pixel 5. And so there it is, the first Pixel phone that I've personally felt a little underwhelmed by. Do I like that they've targeted a lower price point? Absolutely. Do I wish that they still offered a fully flagship phone with all of the bells and whistles? Also, absolutely. So here's what I'll leave you with. If you're coming from a Pixel 4 XL, do not upgrade to this phone unless you desperately need an ultra-wide lens. Otherwise, it'll feel like a downgrade in pretty much every other way. If you're tossing up between this and the Pixel 4a, well, unless you're all about having wireless charging and a higher refresh rate panel, just go with the 4a or even the 4a 5G. And look, in its own regard, the Pixel 5 is actually a really decent phone. It's just that it feels far too similar to the Pixel 4a and 4a 5G, both of which are fantastic values for money. It's also a downgrade from the Pixel 4 XL, which you can also now get for less. So all of this combined just makes the Pixel 5 a much tougher sell.